Afro House is taking over the world. Can you tell? But why? What's so special about this genre? And what do you need to learn to make sure that your tracks can compete at the very top of the charts and get played at festivals in front of thousands of people? Well, after analyzing dozens of Afro House songs, I found a few patterns. And so today we're gonna go through the 5 essential steps that you need to make an Afro House banger. We're gonna start from this and get to this. So whether you're a beginner or an advanced producer, this video is for you because we're gonna start with nothing and make a full track step by step. It might sound like a very simple genre, but there are a few things that often get overlooked. So let's dive into this. Hang on a second, it's too hot in here. I can't do this. That's better. And now on to step number 1, the tempo. Because the tempo is one of the most important factors when defining a genre of music. And even just a few BPMs can make such a difference in the way the song feels. And the first thing I felt when I started listening to Afro House music, not only heard, but felt, is that the songs were a little bit more laid back, a little more chill compared to what's on the radio and what used to be played at festivals, because now Afro House is huge at festivals. So this is kind of going against that garagey Euro trend around 130, 140 BPM. This is kind of the opposite. They slowed down the BPM, and if we just take the top 100 Afro House chart on Beatport, we can see that most of the tracks are around like 120, 122. We have a 126 here, but like 122, 21, 119, 118. So definitely a little more laid back. And this is the first crucial step to keep your songs danceable but chill. And this is also contributing to that sense of nostalgia that you have when listening to most of these Afro House tracks. But this is something that we're going to cover later on in one of the next steps. For this track, I'm going to go for 120 BPM. And then if we need to adjust it later to make sure the track feels right, we're going to do that later. Step number 2, of course, drums. It's still house music. So we got to make sure that we retain those foundations of house music. So we start with the kick, 4 on the floor. But for example, we don't have a clap on the 2 and the 4, and that is already a major difference with most of the other electronic genres. So the sound of the kick is something that we need to pay attention to, because most of these Afro House tracks have kicks that don't sound super aggressive. Usually the kick has a little bit of top, but not the top that you would think of when thinking of like EDM, you know? It's something a little bit softer, but the body of the kick, I would define it pretty round, like a rubbery kick. That's how I would define it. But let me find a few cool samples so you know what I'm talking about. I have a very cool Afro House pack in here, but we don't necessarily need to use samples from Afro House packs. Okay, this one is exactly my definition of Afro House kick, because this is pretty round, but at the same time, it has a little bit of top you can hear, right? But it's not like one of those super aggressive tops like EDM kicks. No, not at all. So I actually ended up selecting 2 different kicks. This one, which is the one that I like the most and that I'm gonna probably use for like the main body of the kick, and this one instead because it has a very interesting top. And I think if I filter out the bottom and I use this only for the top, they could live well together. Of course, this doesn't work now, but if we start cleaning up this one, of course, like lower volume, and I want to make sure that this is really short. A little bit of saturation to make the kick a little bit dirtier, you know? And I also want to use some compression here. Long attack to preserve the transients. Pretty happy with this. The compressor is also helping making the 2 layers sound as a unique layer. The sound is very cool, but that top is a little bit too present for me, and I don't want to EQ it out. There's a plugin that I love to use on kicks whenever I want to shape it without really like changing the samples or like EQing, and this is newfangled Punctuate, which is basically a transient shaper, but you can shape the transients differently depending on the bands, on the frequencies that you choose. And so in this case, this is what I did. I wanted the kick to feel a little bit, you know, bigger in the low end, and I did it from here, And then I reduced a little bit these frequencies, like from 1500 to like 6000 by 2 dBs. This is making a big difference because that's where that top was sitting. And then I gave it 4 dBs, like 20,000, just to have a little bit of air. So the kick is sounding good. We said that most of the times we have no claps on the 2 and the 4. So it's time to find some cool percussions, which are probably the most important element in Afro house drums. And when I say percussions, most of you will probably think of the main accents of Afro house, you know, that but in this case, I actually want to start from the shakers, because shakers are one of those percussions that is always present in Afro house. So I want to make sure that we nail that. So shakers are very simple, very basic in Afro house. They don't do anything special. It's usually like a 16th notes pattern, something like that. So we're gonna just find a few shaker samples here. I found 2 loops that I like, and one thing that I always do with shakers is I select more than 1 loop to make sure that we have that live feeling, like 2 people are playing the shaker at the same time. You know, when you play the shaker, it's impossible to be perfectly on the grid. And especially if it's 2 people doing it at the same time, you know, they're gonna be off by like a few milliseconds. And that's the feeling that I'm going for here. And that's also why I pan them, 1 to the left and 1 to the right, not exactly with the same value, like 30 and 28 here. So we get this effect. If you focus and listen to the left channel, it's different from the right channel. Okay, so it's like 2 people doing it at the same time, but not perfectly in grade. And then to make it a little more interesting, on this one, I added a little phaser flanger. In this case, I selected the flanger. Gives it a little bit more movement and keeps it interesting. Without it, it would be like that. Not a crazy difference, but you can notice it. So after shakers, it's time for the main Afro house accents. We gotta bring in that Afro feeling. So we're gonna do 2 things. We're gonna look for a couple of pre-made loops, pre-made patterns that, you know, can help us building this groove, but we're also gonna create our own pattern, like with our own accents. This is crucial if you wanna give some identity to your tracks, you know? So I'm gonna start by searching on Splice a bunch of loops that inspire me. And I have a little tip for you guys here. When you go on Splice or like through sample packs, even if you're making Afro house, don't just search Afro house. Don't type Afro house loop. Just search for something that has that feeling, that Afro feeling, but not exactly Afro house. So this way you're not going to use the same loops that everybody else is using. So for example, these are some samples that I selected. This is 96 BPM. Okay, so this is supposed to go on a different genre. This is like Afro beat, you know, but it still has some of those accents that we need. So listen to this. Okay, this is very slow, but if we put it at 120 BPM, this could be interesting. Same thing for this one. So I think I'm gonna go with 2 of these, probably chop them up and come up with my own pattern. Oh yeah, I love it. So I wanna keep it pretty simple. So like, and nothing here. Or maybe just this one. Exactly. Okay, perfect. So I think this is better. Not as busy. We're just preserving those accents that we need for sure. And also we want to make sure that we can make these 2 loops that we selected live together. You know, they have to work together. So this is what I got. And as you can hear, we have a few main accents that I would like to enhance, like with my own samples, like ta, tu, ta, tu, ta, tu, ta, tu. So let me select a few of these. And this is the final pattern that I came up with. Pretty cool. Yeah. It's making me move. And why is it so important to do this with multiple layers when you could just grab an Afro house loop from Splice and just, you know, have the track done? Well, this allows you to have way more flexibility. In a second, we're gonna develop this track like a full arrangement with like verse, chorus, the drop. And I wanna be able to like strip this down if I want to. Maybe not use this, or maybe just, you know, mute this in a certain section of the song. I like to have this kind of flexibility, but not only that, this way you're also making sure that you're giving a signature to your groove and you're not simply using a loop that everybody else is using. Okay, so this is pretty much it for the drums. Maybe I'm gonna add a few more layers later on when we have the full track. But now I wanna move on to step number 3. And step number 3 are chords. Chords are one of the most important factors when defining the genre of music. And in Afro House, like the huge Afro House songs all have very beautiful chords. The tracks from Keinemusic, from Diplo, those tracks are very emotional, have chords that give you a sense of like nostalgia, you know? And that's one of the most overlooked things by beginner producers getting into Afro House music. Maybe you can get away with having a groove like this, but if you don't have the right chords, you're not gonna have that feeling. So here you have multiple options. I'm gonna come up with my own chords, but if you can't play an instrument, don't worry, because you can still go on Splice, you can find MIDI chords online. But the important thing here, guys, is don't just go on Splice and type Afro House chords, okay? Because this is what everybody else is doing. Search for chords like at a different BPM, a different genre. Just listen and ask yourself, how do these chords make me feel? Are these emotional? Are these nostalgic enough? And once you find your chords, you're good to go. And remember, if you come up with the chords yourself, you will probably need to use like 7s, 9s. It's difficult to obtain that emotional and very nostalgic feeling with only triads. But let's try with the song. So okay, so this is pretty cool. I actually came up with a little variation of that. So what if we start with just an A minor triad and then touch the 7th here before we go to the G major, which is actually, you know, there's a 4 and a 6th. So this is kind of a interesting chord. We're gonna do something like that. And here, what about this? Oh yeah, I love this. Maybe this time we go to... Love it. Let me try it. Let me try it with the drums now. I love these chords. Wow. Okay. These definitely feel emotional, nostalgic. I think these chords have everything that we need for like a huge Afro House track. Wow. Oh yeah. The vibes that I was looking for. Wow. And one thing that I want to try to make it even more nostalgic is bringing it down to semitones. Oh yeah. Now, once you have the chords, if you really want to make sure that you sound like Keinemusic, you want to play them with a piano. The piano sound is pretty important here. I would go for a pretty soft sounding piano. I just went for a preset from Keyscape, like a grand piano, softest, or another very good option is this Piano V3 from Arturia. This is really good, different sound, but I would still go for like a grand piano for these kind of things. You can also experiment with like the higher octaves, and then it's always a good idea to enrich these chords in some sections of your song with like some pads. I chose this one, for example. Pretty simple pad, like sounding a little bit like a sine wave. I was not happy with the sustain of the piano. I wanted, you know, the piano to not decay as quickly. And so I added this Devil Lock, very simple EQing and some compression. And of course, we can't forget the sidechain. We want that pumping effect, not only on the bass that we're gonna add later on, but also on the piano. Oh yeah, so much better. Okay, so we got the chords, we got the drums, we're getting there. But before we can extend the arrangement and have a proper song with like intro, verse, chorus, drop, we gotta add the vocals. Because this genre, guys, if you haven't noticed, is all about emotional vocals that go together with these chords to create that nostalgic feeling that we're going for. And I already know what you're thinking.
Okay, but where do I find vocals?
I don't know any vocalists.
I don't sing.
And I don't write lyrics.
And I don't even have thousands of dollars to pay a singer.
And you're right. And on top of that, everyone is getting vocals from Splice. So maybe you don't want to use those. And I get it, because it's not nice when you send out your track and the labels get back to you saying they already heard the same vocals on somebody else's track. It's just not a good look. And I struggled for years when I was making EDM back in 2015. There was no Splice and nobody knew where to find good vocals. Well, I have a solution for you guys that I wish I had back then. And this solution is vocalfi.com. It's a website where you can get professionally recorded vocals royalty free. And most of these you can get at a very cheap price, like $34. Like, this is very, very affordable. You can filter by genre. You can see that it's mainly focused around electronic music, but not only. We also have pop, R&B, we have rap. We can go for a male, for a female. We can also select the key and the BPM. But in this case, I want to be open here. I think I want to start from something that is pretty close to our key, which at the moment is G minor. You know, we can always change the key of our song if we want to, but G minor is sounding pretty good. I like the beginning of this one. Pretty cool. All right. So of course we're listening to vocals over different chords, but I have a feeling that I would like this. So when this is the case, you can just click on the track. And once you get to this page, before you actually buy, you have a chance of downloading a demo vocal. So without the track. And this is great, you know, because you can just test it on your song. So that's what I'm going to do now. Transpose it down by 3.
Can you tell me? Vocalfi.com. Is it healthy? No. Vocalfi.com.
Pretty cool.
Every time I look at you, lose concentration.
Let's see the next part.
So tell me why didn't we know where to
Vocalfi.com.
I don't know anymore.
Pretty cool. Okay, I like this, but I also want to find one from a female. I love her voice. Very cool. I'm gonna try this one, but let's say instead you like her voice, like in this case, but you don't like the track. One very cool thing that you can do on Vocalfi is hiring the singer personally for you, for your own project. In this case, we're gonna use wet vocals for time purposes because this is not a video about vocal production. And these are the two options that we have now. Love this one. Very emotional. Woo. Oh wow, what a vibe. Love it. What about the other one though?
Can you tell me? It's on my mind. Is it right? Is it healthy? No, my body's aching. Every time I look at you, lose concentration. Yeah. So tell me why didn't we know where to go?
Love this part.
I don't know anymore.
Very cool.
Maybe you don't feel
You
the
don't
same.
feel-
I can't take the
Nice.
blame, but I just can't ignore. I know that I can't
Little break here, like preparing for the drop.
everything. Oh, don't tell me I'm wrong. I wish this was different. Oh, different.
Oh yeah.
Different. Oh, na 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 na.
Oh wow, love it. So which one do you like the most? Let me know in the comments because I'm actually undecided. Anyway, the vocals sound great, so thank you so much Vocalfi for providing us with professional vocals and for sponsoring this video. And now we're ready to move on to step number 5, which is the bass. So the bass is probably one of the simplest thing about this genre. However, I have a few tips for you, and that's the reason why I kept the bass after the vocals. And the first tip is, let's try to start the song with no bass. So this way you start by introducing the vocals and the chords. We start building out the arrangement. So when the bass comes in, it's like an added layer of emotion. And in my case, I think I'm gonna bring in the bass from the pre-chorus. Second tip, in this genre, you don't want the bass to be in the way of the vocals or the chords. Like the bass is there to support like the emotion with that low end, with those low frequencies, but we don't want a bass sound that is overwhelming, you know? We want a very simple sound, probably a sine wave or a saw wave, something that sounds like this, for example. I just took a very simple preset, like a saw bass, added some saturation here, and then I made sure to filter it out a little bit because I wanted the sound, like we said, not to get in the way of anything. So when this comes in, yeah. Now you feel it. And the way I just played it gives me the chance to introduce the third tip for the bass, which is don't go for a super complicated bass line. The bass is here to just support. So you can go for a very simple bass line like I did. I was just playing the bass note of the chords. Or if you want to spice it up a little bit, maybe with some licks, you can do that as long as they're not like distracting. Something like that. Okay, so at this point, we have all the elements that we needed. We have the drums with the right groove. We have the chords with like the right emotion that we were going for. We have vocals, we have the bass. But now when building the full arrangement of the song, I feel the need to add some Afro house signature sounds. Like for example, if you listen to the new Diplo track that is about to come out, Forever in My Mind, which is actually taken from an old record, like from 2012 or something like that. If you listen to that, you're gonna notice that when you get to the drop, there are a few layers coming in, enhancing the main accent of the groove. I want to try to do the same thing, and I know where to look for because there is a preset inside Nexus, which is not exactly Afro house, but I think it'll get the job done. Love this. Like this is helping the groove so much. And it's making it different enough from the verses without becoming too aggressive, which is something that we definitely don't want in Afro house. There is another signature sound that we definitely cannot miss, and that's that droney lead, like saw wave lead that we hear in basically every single Afro house song. And I'm saying droney because most of the times it only plays a single note. Most of the times that's all it does. And one cool thing that I did to make sure that the tension is increasing going towards the drop, I decided to filter this little lead. I'm automating, you know, the frequency of the filter so it opens as we go towards the drop. And the same thing is also happening to the frequency of the filter inside Diva. So this thing right here is automating. So this is the effect that you get. You start to hear it. Okay. Then it starts opening, you know, more and more, and then super open, and then we bring it back. Love it. So of course it's not mixed, it's not mastered, it's not sounding great at the moment, but we have all the elements that we needed. So now I'm just gonna clean up the session a little bit, balance some instruments, and then I'm gonna play you the final result. Okay, so I did it. The session is now looking great, and I actually added some layers. So I'm just gonna play you the final result, and I'm gonna walk you through these new layers that I added as we hear them. Now we got an intro. Pretty simple, like just the chords and the main groove. And I decided to filter a little bit the piano in the verse to make room for the vocals. Just a supporting synth here, sine wave, nothing special. Oh, and we're listening with this vocal now. Bass and the emotion, yeah. And now there's a new layer coming in here. Listen to this. This is like very cool. A bunch of pianos just supporting the main piano. You've heard this before. The saw opening, a little snare roll. So that's our finished Afro House song. It took a while. If you're still here, I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed it and that you got something out of it. I thought you guys would find it useful, and now you're finally on your way to make your Afro House songs sound pro. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think of this Afro House song. What do you think? Should I send it out to Keinemusic? So now smash that like button if you liked the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.